This is Dan Ferrisi, editor of Sound and Communications Magazine. Happy to be joined this afternoon by Sam Nord, who is VP Global Channel Sales with Listen Technologies. Thanks so much for joining me, Sam.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So today I'd really like to talk about the education vertical. Sound and Communications covers all the verticals, and I know Listen Technologies plays in a lot of verticals as well, but education is very important these days. It's on the tip of a lot of people's tongues. I want to talk about K through 12. I also want to talk about higher ed. To start, tell me are there any overarching trends that you're seeing in the education vertical overall? And then we can kind of zero in on maybe whether K through 12 has more money or higher ed does, what their individual trends are. But are there any macro trends you have your eye on?
Well, it's just been interesting overall to kind of see, just as an overall trend, to see how the world is sort of coming back, to see who's spending money again. And we're seeing a lot in the overall education sector in general, as we kind of go through where our larger projects are coming from, where our larger orders are coming from. By and large, or at least for us, the education sector has always been a very strong vertical market for us in general. And over the last several months in particular, we've seen in general, as we kind of bucket where our larger projects are coming from and where our bigger orders are coming from, that in fact, the majority of them are coming from that sector right now. So I think it's a really nice sign to see that money seemed to be freeing up again in general. And it's interesting because we have seen some kind of micro trends, that are very relevant, I think, to the current world situation we're living in, of course. But what's been a nice factor as well, as we've seen a lot of projects starting to move forward, both in the K through 12 and the upper ed, frankly, that are just kind of very, for us, very traditional, assistive listening projects that are the type of things that we had seen maybe get held back a little bit in the last year, things that have maybe been put on hold that are now moving forward again. So those are, of course, really nice to see kind of coming back on track. I'm in California, so I don't think anyone's been any more locked down than we've been here. So seeing, especially here locally, some of the California universities, some of the California K through 12 school districts moving forward with projects that have, big chunks of assistive listening, which typically indicate a major new build or, a new construction project or major retrofit. That's always something that we take as something to be hopeful about.
So it sounds like funds are flowing with respect both to K through 12 and higher education. Would you say, based on your expertise and the projects you're seeing in the pipeline, that one or the other is even more flush with cash right now? And regardless of your answer to that, are there particular trends you're seeing, say, within K through 12 that they're looking for a system of this kind with this capability, or for higher ed, they're looking for a system of this kind with this capability? Are those the same needs or are they entirely different?
I would say they're a little bit different. So it's a really interesting question. I haven't, I would say overall, my gut feeling is we have maybe seen a little bit more on the K through 12 side. If I were to do a true data analytics, maybe, maybe that's my gut feeling as far as the overall projects that we've seen come through. Um, I could be off on that, but that's certainly what my gut tells me. It's been really interesting to see the type of projects that have been coming through. The K through 12 side has been really interesting just in the need, because I mean, as a company that is probably most known as an assistive listening company, I mean, there's a certain type of project that we're always involved with, making sure that we're there to help people hit their assistive listening compliance and making sure that everyone in a classroom or, auditorium is heard. That's something that is very familiar with us, to us. That's something that's pretty common. What's been really interesting on the K through 12 side, of course, over the last several months is we've seen these very interesting trends with how our products are being utilized. And just kind of as schools have altered how things are being taught. I mean, it's one of these interesting situations where I'm not just I'm kind of both the customer and the vendor, because if you were to move about this house right now, there is also a school occurring in the same place that I'm running this office. We have a hybrid situation. So, what we're seeing, we have a thing that we're seeing a lot right now in the K through 12 space, of course, is a lot of these hybrid learning spaces where there are a lot of students that are on campus, but of course they need to maintain all the safety protocols. They need to be able to stay a particular distance apart and still, of course, be able to hear what's going on in the classroom, right? I mean, you still have to be able to communicate, hear what the instructor's saying, hear what all the fellow students are saying, be able to ask a question and be able to have a valuable education experience while you're at school. So what we're finding is, some of our products that may have initially been, thought of, on the originally for something else, like we have a two-way communication system called Listen Talk that was originally really thought of as a tour guide system. Well, as it turns out, it's also has ended up being this really fantastic way for these classroom situations where people need to be physically distant from one another to be able to hear really well in the classroom. But of course, you have situations like here where you also have students who are on the far end, who are in a hybrid situation, who are distance learning. Well, we've also found that what a lot of schools are doing now is actually taking one of the devices and actually inputting it. Not all of these classrooms are even really set up for audio initially. So what a lot of them are doing is, connecting it to the projector or the screen in the space so that it can be tied into the overall the sound system, so all that audio could also carry back to the students who are on the far end, on the hybrid side, on the distant learning side, so they can hear what the instructor is saying and they can hear the questions that their fellow students are asking and commenting on. So it's just been really interesting how our products that were definitely conceived of for an entirely different purpose have been repurposed for these really unique use cases that are really helping schools be able to continue on and kind of slowly bring students back on campus in a really controlled way.
It's fascinating the way our industry, be it integrators or technology managers or end users, can end up repurposing some of the technologies that, as you say, manufacturers, vendors have kind of one idea for, or it's purpose built for that. But yet, people in our industry can innovate new ways that it's a remarkably effective technology and it works really well. And obviously, these are unprecedented times in a lot of ways. We've been kind of saying that almost as a cliche for the last year, but it is true. And I think that kind of industry innovation and finding new uses for existing products bespeaks, the kind of experiential difference our technologies can make.
Well, it's been so funny because we had this project for this exact application I was talking about, again, where they're in the classroom, the teacher is wearing a device, they have a device for the students, and then they have another one connected to the projector. I'm like, well, that's a really cool use, but it's kind of unique. I wonder, and then all of a sudden it's just sprouting up. All my salespeople are like, God, I have like 6 of these, and there's another one in this district. And so yeah, I mean, it's just one thing that if we've learned nothing else over the last year is, make sure your products are versatile and not so nichey that they can only be used for this one very small specific application. Because we've definitely found that the more broad use you can make a product, sometimes without even realizing it, to be frank, is super valuable. So yeah, it's been pretty neat how both internally and externally, sometimes the customers or integrators can find these really unique ways to put these products together in a way that is really valuable for the customer, for sure.
So as you said, money is already flowing, both K through 12 and higher education. Projects seem to be queuing up. The economy does seem to be picking up steam. And by the time people are watching this, very likely the next stimulus package will have passed. There's going to be a lot of money for schools in that. So what is your assessment as someone who works for a company that is very well ensconced within the education space? If I'm an integrator, if I'm a consultant, if I'm a design build person, how can I ready my company to take advantage of the opportunities to outfit K through 12 higher ed venues over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Do you have any advice from the vendor's eye perspective of how I can get my integration business in position to take advantage of these dollars that are going to be flowing?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it comes down to kind of what we've been talking about is, there's a lot, again, speaking just for our kind of unique niche, we're an assistive listening company, or at least a company that's primarily been known as an assistive listening company. So we're always there for those kind of opportunities, where traditional installation is taking place. But I think to answer your question, we have to be really cognizant right now of these unique opportunities that are taking place. I there's money flowing for sure, but the way that the education space is opening up right now, there's going to be very unique applications going on right now. As you open up, I think as they continue to have these hybrid spaces, as they continue to rethink how classrooms are being done in general. One of the things that I've really noticed over the last I will say month or two is some of this time off, or some of this time has allowed universities, we talked about K through 12, moving on to maybe the university space, has given some of the universities a chance to really rethink how they standardize, kind of moving on from how things have always been done and moving on to, can we move on from this technology that we've always used into something that would more be befitting our students. We've just, to give a kind of a listening example, we have a Wi-Fi based solution for assistive listening that that we're having a lot of universities come now as they've had some time to rethink, well, here's how we've always done assistive listening, but now that we have some time to kind of really sit down and focus and you know, don't have to worry so much about the day to day because the classrooms haven't been filled. Now we can go and really plan for the future. We'd like to move to this other technology that we think would, for the long term, be more beneficial. So I think, that's one mechanism that integrators can, kind of get on the leading edge of, just making sure that they're addressing the real current needs of and these of the schools as they come up with things that are going to be as people start to re-enter a school, right? There's all sorts of needs for distancing and communication, and that's just one thing. That's just our our little area. I'm sure all throughout there's different technologies that are going to need to be addressed, and so those just being really cued into those new ways of doing things that are going to be here for the long term. I think that's one way to do that.
I think that's absolutely true. If there's anything that COVID-19 has done for us, it's kind of made us expert adapters, or at least those who have been able to succeed over the last 9 to 12 months have learned to be expert adapters and learned to be flexible. We can't always do things the same old way. We have to keep an eye to the new and emerging trends and be nimble enough to respond to those quickly. So it seems like that's really what you're talking about, kind of a strategic agility where you're keeping an eye on the trends and willing to kind of mold your solution and your approach to them.
100%. I mean, that's, if there's been nothing else that we learned over the last year, that's exactly it. I mean, our, certainly at Listen, a lot of the reasons that we, didn't have the kind of drop, frankly, that I think that we may have feared over the last year is because of the fact that people found unique uses for our products in the last year. If people weren't gathering in traditional spaces to use, maybe a traditional assistive listening system, people who didn't have the luxury, say, to the people who didn't have the luxury to work from home were finding unique uses of our products, again, as a social distance tool. So it just kind of shifted in a different direction. So I think that's exactly the lesson, is kind of finding who's doing business and what are the unique uses of the people who are utilizing these kind of products, and how can products, again, to the point that we've been making throughout this call, how can these products be used in unique ways to meet the needs of the people who are out in the workforce.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Sam. It was a really illuminating conversation. This has been Dan Ferrisi, editor of Sound and Communications Magazine. So happy to have been joined by Sam Nord, VP Global Channel Sales for Listen Technologies. Thanks again, Sam. Be well and talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's always great to chat with you.